Welcome. It's time for one-on-one with Titilayo Oyinson, and we always encourage you to join the conversation whenever we go live. We're live presently on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. It's a pleasure having you right there with us. You can, of course, ask questions and contribute to the conversation by clicking on the chat box on whatever platform you're viewing us from. And I have a feeling you need that information because the conversation we're going to have today is a really interesting one. We're here to talk about making a case for investing in fine wine. And it's a conversation that is going global. Speaking of globally, fine wine is fast emerging as a stable investment asset in turbulent times. Now, in South African wine, not being an exception here, we have quite a lot of stats telling us that unlike traditional financial assets, which tend to move with the stock markets and market sentiments, fine wine returns have little to zero correlation with the financial markets. Now, we have loads of great news stories and loads of newsmakers, and we believe that this is one of them. My name is Titilayo Oyinson. Welcome to One on One. Now, when investing in fine wine, the key factors to consider include track record of both the wine producer and the merchant, brand equity, vintage, region, provenance, and critic review. Now, when Wine Cellar is one of those companies that has taken this to heart. Now, studying economics at the University of Stellenbosch meant that Roland Peens was surrounded by wine. He gave in to its lures, and as soon as he had finished his degree, he found his way back into the industry. And he's here today to help break down the ins and outs of fine wine as an investment. It's great to have you with us, Roland.
Yeah, Titi, thank you so much. And thanks for shedding some light on this alternative asset. It's definitely a niche investment in today's sphere or in today's market. But it's certainly a possible investment. And I can share with you what some of the really positive points on investing in fine wine is.
I'm really interested in this myself because, as you've probably noted, most of the more traditional modes of investment have just been going all over the place. I don't think so. I've had conversations with financial asset managers, and they're saying they've never seen the markets this volatile. Have you been able to find a correlation between how these markets have affected yours?
So I like understanding how these asset classes work and stores of value work. And gold has traditionally been the unit that you would put your money into over a very long term to retain its value and grow its value. And in mining gold, there's a natural 2% value addition every year. That's how much more gold is produced, so 2% inflation. Bitcoin has its own built-in inflation with its halving every 4 years. And wine too has a natural law of inflation, and that's really because the longer that you keep it, the less there is available because people tend to drink it, obviously. And the good wines, the great wines, which have built up track records over a very long period, there's a very good likelihood that they're going to continue producing that wine of that quality with the same strategy. And therein lies an opportunity to buy into a company, into a product, into an industry which is continuing year after year. It's seen many tough scenarios in the market, been through many depressions, booms and busts, let's call it. And this asset class seems over the long term to really increase in value. And if one looks at LiveX, which is the stock market of fine wine, and they've been tracking fine wine since 2004 with an index, that average growth is 7%, which is really
This is
excellent.
annually, 7% annually.
7% annually since 2004. And if you go back another 50 years, if you can find that data, it's about the same. On two weekends ago, we had a 1945 Mouton Rothschild,
Wow.
an 80-year-old wine, which back then would have cost a fraction of what it costs today. We had a 1982 Lafite, which cost $25 a bottle in 83 when it was sold first. And now it's going to cost you about $2,000 or $3,000 a bottle. So that's a huge appreciation. Yes, it's been 40 years, but the great wines, they just get more and more expensive, mostly because there's less and less on the market. And there's a built-in deflation, essentially.
So, I think about people who have been investing in all the other traditional markets, and maybe you meet them along the way in what you do. What is the conversation essentially about whenever you're trying to, in a sense, convince them to try investing in fine wine? How does the conversation go? What are the questions they usually ask, and how do you respond?
Well, I guess I've been lucky because I've been personally connected to a lot of these people over a long period. Another factor with fine wine is it's a long-term product. You sell a client a bottle today, and he might only drink it in 20 years' time. So having done this for 20 years, those wines are now mature, and I've had that long relationship with clients. So you get to understand them and what makes them tick. And I really, it comes down to a balanced portfolio of your investments. You need to look at the risk of all of your assets and all your asset classes and see how much appetite you have for risk. Wine is seen as an alternative asset and therefore more risky. If you look at the long-term growth of fine wine, it probably looks a lot less risky than some of the other asset classes. It's just much smaller. It's niche. It hasn't been mainstream because it's a very difficult product to trade in. But since there's been a lot of automation in the industry over the last 10 or 15 years, it now becomes much easier to trade. It becomes much easier to understand the dynamics of the industry. And therefore, we have LiveX operating as a stock market effectively at the top end. And I'm sure at every level of the industry, the bulk level has got an exchange of sorts. So there's a lot of seamless transactions happening within the industry, and therefore a lot of trade and liquidity, and therefore interest from all around.
But we have to talk a little bit about that automation, the technical side to things, because most people think of trading in wine. They think of actual wine cellars. They think of having to go for tastings. They have to, be there on ground. Do you have to physically be available right there where the product actually is in order to invest in it?
No, not at all. There are international products that you can purchase. The unitization of the product is difficult because you always have to link it back to the value of a bottle, and so you don't get a JSC type product yet in the international market or the local market. But one can subscribe to companies that will purchase on your behalf, will sell you a basket of wines, and Wine Cell has been doing that for the last 5 years. We've offered unitized packages of fine wine, and therefore we take the guesswork away. We say these are the most investable wines we think after our extensive work in this industry, our understanding of the industry. And, this is the way to invest without having to know about every single winery, property, vintage, and all the other variables that come down to fine wine.
Okay, so of course, when it comes to investing, the first thing people think about is that word, the R word, risk. What are the risks, and how do they apply in this particular industry? Because fine wine, as they say, it is fine wine for a reason. It's been stored at a particular temperature in a particular way over a particular number of years to have that value. So, what are the risks involved, and how can we manage them?
Well, we now are in a place where you can insure your wine for market value. You can pay for professional cellaring. At Wine Cellar, we cellar about 2,000 customers of that collect wine, and in Europe, you can subscribe to many merchants and warehouses where you can professionally store wine at a fee. It'll cost you between 1% and 2% per year to do that, but that is one of the costs of holding this asset. So once you have professional storage and you're buying top-end fine wines, really the risk comes down to, is a wine ever going to implode in its value? And we've never seen that happen. A winery would have to just stop operations, which would unlikely be the case. Somehow there would have to be some sort of calamitous event that would trigger wines to become worthless. I think everything would become worthless. We see more wealthy individuals in the market, both here and internationally, and the gap between the wealthy and the poor seems always to be widening. So there are more and more people looking for top-end products, top-end investments, and these fine wines fit into that. There's only a very short supply of these products, and they're going to a very small part of the world's population. So you can imagine the more these brands become more and more famous, they become more and more demanded, and therefore the price goes up, and it's been going up above inflation.
I'm actually looking at one of your sites here. This is winecellar.co.za, I believe. And I'm seeing South African wine here. You have them in all sorts of categories and the like. People that I've spoken to about fine wine, especially here in Africa, they are often maybe familiar with certain names, certain titles, but there are a few of them that are more rare than others. Could you give us a little insight into which wine right now is highest in demand from South Africa?
Sure. I've done some analysis on the secondary market prices, and I compare what they sell on the secondary market to the primary market, which is when they sell from the producer straight to the customer. And in South Africa, because we have a very small market, that gap is very large. Because the liquidity is relatively low, the volume is low, it's a small market. In the formalized international trade, the price on the secondary market is generally much closer to the market price or the release price, unless it's a very scarce, very expensive, highly demanded wine. And Romani Conti is the most expensive wine in the world. And
Romani
probably
Conti.
Romani Conti. It's from Burgundy in France.
Okay.
It's a Pinot Noir.
Okay.
And over decades, it's proven itself to be the best vineyard in Burgundy, and therefore has attracted incredible demand. And so that wine on release is perhaps 50,000 Rand a bottle, but on the open market, it's 500,000 Rand. So let's call it $2,500 to $25,000. It's a really expensive wine. And in South Africa, the equivalent would be in Eben Sadi, where the wines are released at around 300, 350, 400 Rand a bottle, and they sell in the open market at 4,000 Rand a bottle. So there's a 6 to 10 fold difference between the secondary market and the primary market. But there's very small volume, and therefore you couldn't come in as a fund manager and say, I'd like to buy $1 million worth, because they only make $20,000 worth. It's a very small.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. But when you think about making an investment in any particular field, you think about the window to go in and the window to come out. When do you go in? When do you come out? Is there a specific period that you probably encourage? I wouldn't use the word advise, encourage your customers to go in for a bottle.
Yeah, so this is not a speculative industry, and what it's not like is the recent crypto market or the recent NFT market, where large gains can be made in a very short space of time. This is a long-term investment that you're going to make. If you're going to make the investment for less than 5 years, you're probably not the right kind of investor for the product. It's a long-term journey, and you're not going to see wild returns, and not in the short term at all. So one needs to definitely think long-term.
Okay, so with long term, there has to be an amount you think we should go in with. If you're a beginner, you're just starting out, and you were trying to make a case for me to, maybe try it out. What do you think I should go in with? Talking rand or dollars?
Well, I think I'll go percentage. How
Okay.
much of your net worth do you want to put into an asset like this? And
Okay.
I've got some experience with this. And one really needs to look at, again, all of the asset classes. This is a very stable, and you say risky, but really it's not a risky industry. It's a fine wine asset, a fine good. LVMH, Richemont, these companies have been around for a long time. They produce prodigious results. They've highly successful companies that are locked into this luxury market. Long-term luxury brands have a lot of certainty built into them. So it's not a risky investment. So 10% of your portfolio as a number, why not? It's probably going to, over the long run, give more of a solid support than as alternative risky asset.
Okay, then of course, once you go in for an investment like this, you're most likely going to have insurance and the like, also coming up with it as well. So you have to also factor that in. But 10% of your portfolio, yes, going in with 10%, you're anticipating probably in 15, 20 years. What do you think would you get back after maybe a 10% investment? What are we thinking?
Well, personally, I have more than 10% of my wealth in wine. You have
Okay,
to live what you preach,
sure.
and I guess I've been in and around fine wine my whole life, so it's an important part of what I do. But I'm just hoping that I won't need that to sell that
Mm,
wine, and I can drink it
mm.
all. That's my hope, and that's the
How
great
old will
thing
you
about.
be when you eventually drink it?
Well,
Uh,
I've dealt with customers with 20,000 bottles of wine, and if you divide the nights that they have available in their lives by
wow.
20,000, it's they can't drink that much wine ever. So it's a bit of
Wow.
an addiction that you also get to being around fine
Mm,
wine,
mm,
and some people love collecting, and I think that also drives the market. One doesn't
mm,
collect gold ETFs, or one
mm.
collects lots of wine. It's a wonderful industry, and in fact, some people argue it's the greatest industry in the world because you're combining so many variables. You're combining nature. You're combining human artistic ability, commerce. Over a long time, over different regions. It's just it culminates in an incredible product, and the fact that
Okay.
it can age for so long just makes it even more alluring. And I guess that's that complexity that gives it the risky type of name tag. But as it becomes more mainstream, that risk is
Mm,
diminishing, and it's now a
mm.
lot more seriously attractive as an investment.
I'm definitely attracted to it because I have had my fingers burnt in quite a few other sectors. Let's just put it like that. And yeah, I really have. I don't know if I mentioned this to you the first time we had a conversation. I have some bottles that I've had for at least 15 years now. There's a particular bottle. I can't remember the name, but I know where it is. It is catching dust somewhere in a chest. I kept it there because it was actually given to me by the captain of a navy ship. So I got to go onto a navy ship, and this captain said he got it from Portugal or something like that.
Wow.
And and when he gave it to me, I looked at it and I was like, there was no way I was drinking this. And this was years ago. And I didn't even have any idea about the industry then. I didn't understand how fine wine was valued. I didn't understand anything about wine tasting and the like. But then again, I think that is an issue, the educating people about it, talking more about it. What sort of platforms are in place to give people a little bit more insight into what this particular industry is all about? And are you even encouraging it in the first place?
Look, I encourage people to drink wine all the time, maybe too much. That's been my job for the last 20 years. It's not something you could force onto someone. You either enjoy it or you don't. If you're a serious investor, I think it would be your duty to understand the asset, to do your due diligence. If it was any investment that you're going to make, if you want to make it your hobby, there's one easy way to start. Buy some wine, and instead of just gulping it down and talking about the weather, talk to your partner, get a group of friends together, and educate one another. There's enough information in books, magazines, on the internet, YouTube to find everything you need to know about fine wine. But drinking it, tasting it, talking about it, going to tastings, going to lectures, that's what one needs to do. And I've had the privilege of tasting all the great wines in the world, and presenting them to hundreds and hundreds of people. So it's a little bit easier for me to talk about, but it's a language, and one needs to learn the language. Unfortunately, it's not something you can get into very quickly.
Yeah, I'm looking at this particular page on auctions, and we've talked a bit about auctions before. Talked about NFTs and the like, NFT wines and the like, some time back. I think, okay, I can see a Rothschild Chateau, right?
Yep.
That's a 2000 bottle there. Merlust, I think that's a 1994. Castro Bonnet, 2010.
So that's the Ibn Sadi that I was talking about earlier, the Columella, one of the most revered wines in South Africa, as well as the Paul Sauer and the Merlust Rubicon. When you mentioned the introduction, you spoke about brand equity. It's all about brand equity when it gets to the top end level. Dom Perignon, which is the fourth one there, is owned by LVMH. And one can have a look at they're a listed company. You can look at their profit margins; they're huge, and they're very successful. They produce millions of bottles of Dom Perignon. It's, I think, the most incredible brand on the planet out of any product that you can buy. It's produced by grapes. It's farming conditions, with all the complexity that it brings, and then it's translating that into a brand that can be translated, sold in every single restaurant in the world. It's an incredible brand, and again, that's what gives it its desirability of investment. It's not going anywhere. It's, in fact, taking over. One needs to get in on that investment. Brands become powerful, and the greater the brand, the more that it can scale, the more that it has traction in bigger markets, the more able it is to ride out tough times. Some of these champagne houses have got 5-6 years worth of stock. So if the taps had to be turned off tomorrow for a year, they'd be fine. So they're incredibly resilient brands that we're talking about here, and that's what gives you the ability and the confidence to invest in.
Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up very soon, but then I just wanted to touch on one thing. We haven't really talked about flavors, tastes. There are some things that make a wine taste good. Now, I know we've been talking a bit about investment in wine, but then what is it that is so balanced about those fine wines? What do you think gives them their flavor? Is it the ground in which they're harvested from, or sown in? Do you think it has something to do with the weather? I know you've done a lot of research on this, but for someone watching for the first time, just give a little insight.
Yes, it's everything that you said. It's got to do with the weather, the grapes, the winemaker, the temperature, the different variety, the slope, the winter temperature, the frost potential. There's so many variables within fine wine, and that's what makes it an incredible product. But it comes down to one simple equation for me when one wants to speak about fine wine versus a beverage. A fine wine is a wine where the producer, in every step of the process, picks the quality over the cost-saving option. And that happens a lot in wine, from the day that you start out as a wine producer through to the day that it's put into bottle. There are options all the way through the process, and there are obviously much cheaper options at every stage. But there's a way to produce the best quality, and the best producers, the fine wines, they always pick quality. Quality is the most important. It underpins the entire asset class. If the wines were quality, then they would fail. And quality is always the most important part of wine.
All right, then. Roland Peens here, the founder and director of Strauss Co. Fine Wine, and of course, winecellar.co.za. It's always a pleasure having you right here with us.
It's a pleasure being on your show, and thanks for asking such exciting questions.
Oh, thank you. I just want to embellish on who exactly you are right now. Let me make you blush a little. Now, Roland worked in marketing, retail, exports as a sommelier before joining Wine Cellar. And Wine Cellar is one of South Africa's foremost importers and retailers of fine wines. Now, he's also a partner and has been director since 2005. Local and international study as well, as regular travel has added to his extensive insight into the wine world. Now, you'll find Roland at most of South Africa's top wine events, judging, learning, exploring the world of wine, and for expanding his palate. And when he isn't popping corks, apparently he likes to cook. Hopefully you use wine to cook too, am I right?
Well, we had some international guests a couple of days ago, and I cooked with a whole red wine as a marinade to a lamb that we sourced from the farm. Yeah, we didn't do.
Nice. All right, then. I have to say thank you once again for joining us, Roland. Always a pleasure.
Okay, thanks so much. Well,
all right, then. Okay, so that's
bye-bye.
it on today's episode of One on One with Titila Oinso. So it's always a pleasure being here on your screens. We're streaming right now on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and of course Twitter. We have quite a bit to talk about on One on One, and as soon as we begin, it's actually sometimes hard to put a pause to it. You can of course ask your questions and make some contributions in the comment or chat section or on whatever platform you're watching us on. And of course, if you would like to be a part of One on One, all you have to do is send us an email. It is the Dynamite Podcast Network at gmail.com. Dynamite Podcast Network at gmail.com. As soon as you send a mail, we'll get back to you. And make sure you make it a date with us. Until next time, have a great day.